Let me tell you, if you'd asked me a year ago whether I thought I'd ever see a day when the infamous Debbie Marshall, the self-crowned queen of Crestview Heights, would wind up in an orange jumpsuit, I'd have laughed you right off my newly mowed lawn. But here we are. And honestly, I still get goosebumps when I think about that night. The night everything changed for our neighborhood. You know what I mean? There are some people who just seem born to make everyone else miserable, and Debbie was one of them. She didn't just enforce HOA rules, she weaponized them, slapped you with a fine for a hose on the sidewalk, a spot of rust on your bumper, a garden gnome that looked at her funny. And, naturally, her favorite target was me. Ethan Caldwell, the landscaping guy, the eyesore with the dented work truck in the driveway. It all kicked off on a blazing Saturday morning, sweat soaking my shirt, 3 hours deep into mowing Mrs. Henderson's jungle of a yard. Debbie was marching across the street, clipboard raised like a medieval shield, that phony smile stretched across her face. She wore it like a mask, you know, and after 10 years in this neighborhood, I could spot a fake from a mile away. She didn't even bother with small talk, just launched right in. Ethan, we need to discuss your vehicle. I killed the mower, wiped my brow, and prepared for the usual nonsense. Carlos, my right-hand guy, shot me a look that said it all. Here we go again. Debbie riffled through her papers like she was about to pull out my permanent record from kindergarten. I'm afraid your work truck's been parked in the same spot for over 48 hours. That violates Regulation 17B. And frankly, it doesn't meet our standards. She held up a neon yellow violation notice, already relishing the moment. You've got 48 hours to move it, or it's a $500 fine. $500, just like that. Nearly a week's profit for my little business. Money I needed to keep my family above water. This is ridiculous, I muttered, but Debbie just beamed, like she'd delivered a gift. The real kicker? As she strutted away, she glanced over at a sheriff's truck parked on the street, looking at it with a gleam in her eye. That truck had been sitting there for 2 days. Odd, since Deputy Hayes was never one to linger. Something didn't add up, but I didn't have time to worry about it then. By lunchtime, half the neighborhood had heard about my eyesore violation. Thanks to Evelyn Porter, our resident gossip queen, who filmed the whole exchange and blasted it on the Crestview group chat. Some days, you just can't win. That's when the tide started to turn. Debbie wasn't just after my truck. She was gunning for my entire business. Early the next morning, I caught her measuring the distance from my mailbox to the curb, hunting for any excuse to write me up again. When she announced, "Your mailbox is 3 inches too close to the property line," I nearly spat out my coffee. You had to see her, teetering in those ridiculous heels, stumbling over my garden hose, still scribbling notes. By noon, I'd lost 3 clients. They called to say Debbie had warned them. Keep hiring me, and they'd get violations too. My blood was boiling. So, yeah, I fought back. Carlos and I planted a massive neon sign in my yard. Free lawn art. No HOA needed. Plastic flamingos, the works. The group chat blew up, and for once, the laughter wasn't at my expense. Even Debbie's diehard supporters cracked a smile. But the real twist came when a piece of paper tumbled from Debbie's purse as she stormed over in a rage. A letterhead from something called Summit Crew, with a note, 3 more houses by month end. Make it happen. Suddenly, it wasn't just about me and my truck. Debbie was working for someone. That chilled down my spine. That was fear, but also determination. I wasn't about to let some shadowy developer push me out of the only home I'd ever known. So I aired the whole story out in our community group, told everyone how Debbie was sabotaging my business, detailed her threats, and the weird Summit Crew connection. Comments flooded in, stories about fines for chalk drawings, complaints about grass height, beige paint shades. We'd all been victims. But in my anger, I made one mistake. A tiny slip in quoting the HOA rule number. Debbie pounced, turning public opinion right back against me. Flyers appeared everywhere with my face. Warning of shady business practices. Clients bailed. My reputation, years in the making, was crumbling. Still, there was a war on, and I wasn't backing down. Carlos and I followed Debbie to a book club meeting, spotted her meeting a guy with a Summit Crew logo on his briefcase, passing off envelopes and plans. Now I knew. She was the puppet, not the puppet master. The next morning, Debbie confronted me on Mrs. Henderson's lawn, screaming about me stalking her. Mrs. Henderson, bless her heart, calmly told Debbie to get off her property and started recording. That video, Debbie screaming that she ran Crestview and decided who stays and who goes went viral in seconds. Her mask slipped for good, but Debbie wasn't done. Next came a vandalism charge, her car keyed, and guess who she blamed? Me. Deputy Hayes was by the book, but she knew something was off. The HOA called an emergency meeting, and I was staring down the barrel of banishment from my own neighborhood. That night, desperate, Carlos and I staked out Debbie's house. We saw her, dressed like a wannabe cat burglar, try to break into that sheriff's truck, using a Slim Jim and muttering about finding dirt. She cracked the lock, rifled through the glove box, just as the motion light flared and Deputy Hayes stepped out of the shadows. Breaking into a law enforcement vehicle, Debbie. That's a felony. Evelyn was live streaming. Neighbors spilled out to watch. Debbie tried to run, tripped over her own no parking sign. It was, in a word, poetic. The fallout was epic. The community center was packed for the next meeting, people on edge, hungry for answers. Deputy Hayes explained it all. The truck was a bait vehicle in a string of break-ins. They hadn't expected the HOA president herself to be the perp. Debbie, lawyered up but desperate, tried to spin her actions, claiming she was looking for evidence against me. But then I played the viral video for the room, her threats, her confession. Nate, one of her old supporters, stood up and declared, I was wrong. Ethan's the man. The HOA board voted her out on the spot. That should have been the end. But Summit Crew wasn't finished. Debbie tried one last time to turn the tables, rolling into another HOA meeting with a doctored video, supposedly showing me bribing neighbors. But Carlos, always quick, pointed out the file name, Debbie_wins, and called Tom Bradley, the bribed neighbor, who was live on the beach in Florida that day. The room erupted. Then, by sheer accident, Debbie herself played a secret selfie video, boasting about getting kickbacks from Summit Crew, pressuring homeowners to sell. She'd just confessed, on camera, to the entire scam. Security escorted her out, and the neighborhood cheered as if the team had just won the Super Bowl. Debbie's arrest set off a wave of relief, but also something like sorrow, a realization that we'd let this happen for so long. Her sentencing was swift and brutal. 15 years for conspiracy, fraud, extortion, and breaking and entering. Turned out, Summit Crew had blackmailed her, using dirt from an old job, but that didn't excuse the years she'd spent tormenting her neighbors for cash. With Debbie gone, Crestview Heights came alive again. I was busier than ever, hired 2 more guys, and we finally had a barbecue where nobody measured grass height or wrote up violations for ketchup stains. But the threat wasn't gone, just shifted. I found a letter under my windshield from Summit Crew's regional director, congratulating me, offering a job opportunity. I showed it to Deputy Hayes, who promised to get the feds involved. We'd won the battle, but the war for Crestview Heights had just begun. So here's my question for you. Have you ever gone toe-to-toe with a bully, someone who thought they could buy your silence, your home, your life? How did you fight back? Drop a comment, share your story. Because if there's one thing Crestview Heights proved, it's that when neighbors stick together, even the biggest bullies can't win. And hey, if you want to hear the next chapter, hit that bell. I have a feeling things are just getting interesting.